Hi, welcome to Parent Academy Real Talk. My name is Mary Beth Stapleton, Manager of Family and Community Partnerships for Harford County Public Schools. Today we're talking about special education and how to support students with special needs. And we have wonderful experts and guests here to support us in this today. So we'll start with introductions. Dan?
Hi, Danny Zabrowski, special education teacher at Harvard Grace Elementary School.
Hi, I'm Laura Filer. I'm a special education teacher at Falston Middle School and also the mom of two boys, one of whom happens to have Down syndrome.
Shannon Jennings-Jones, Department Chair of Special Education at Magnolia Middle. I am also the proud parent of a 10-year-old who has special needs.
Hi, I'm Missy Romano. I'm Coordinator of Special Education, Birth to 5.
Hi, I'm Erin Kassouf, and I'm a special educator at Abingdon Elementary.
Hi, I'm Dawn Markovic, and I am the proud mom of two boys, one that is on the autism spectrum, and he's 19, and he's in the Harford County Public Schools, and one that is 15, and he is also has a 504. I'm also the chair for the third year in a row of Harford County CCAC.
And I'm Colleen Sastelli. I'm the coordinator of compliance for Harford County Public Schools Department of Special Education. I'm also a parent, but they're out of school now. So.
I'm also a parent. Three wonderful children. Bye, guys.
Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate you taking the time out of the school and your busy day to join us to give parents really important information about this topic. So first things first, as a mother of 4, I remember as a young mother and really trying to be an intentional parent about, looking at milestones and trying to think about how things are developing. Trying to understand what's considered typical and atypical for young children is probably pretty important for parents to know about. And I'm also a grandparent now, right? And so I'm also seeing that with my grandson. So what are some milestones that we should be looking for with young children? So we're thinking about from birth to perhaps, start in kindergarten. What are some things we should see that would be typical and some things that would be considered atypical?
I'm new in the world of infants and toddlers, but I was a special educator in infants and toddlers, and now I'm overseeing the Birth to 5 program for Harford County. And over the last few months, working with families and our service providers, I've learned a lot about milestones and resources to help families and service providers really understand development birth through age 5. And all little ones, they develop at different rates, and so, but we're looking at different things. We're looking at communication, motor development, social emotional, early literacy, communication. There's a lot of big things that happen to little ones at birth to 5. So we found some really great resources to help us understand, like, what is expected at 18 months, what is expected at 24 months, 36 months, 48 months. And there's a really wonderful resource for families that we like to use in infants and toddlers as well as preschool special education. The CDC has a milestone tracker that you can actually download and put on your app, and so you can look up what's expected at 2 months, what's expected at 18 months, what's expected at 36 months for communication, social emotional, motor development, and what it does is it notes what's typical behavior for that child, and then it also provides strategies for families to use. And then it gives you some red flags. So if there's certain things, like if you have a child that's 3 years old that may not be using words and sentences and things like that, that may be a red flag, which means that you may want to talk to your pediatrician, or you may want to contact the Infants and Toddlers program if they're under the age of 3, and that's 410-638-3823, or if they're 3 years and above, 3 to 5 years, we would contact Child Find, which is 410-638-4386.
Missy, I'm glad you brought up the pediatricians. I remember being a first-year parent, right out. You can read all the books you want, right? Go to all the shops, but like nothing prepares you. There's too many things to remember. So one of the people that were crucial in the development of our children and us as parents were our pediatricians. Yeah. And every time we'd go in for a checkup, it took us till the second child to kind of figure it out. Like, they would always ask you, hey, are they able to hold a cup? Can they, communicate their wants and needs? Yeah. And they're also going through those developmental checklists with you. Right. So it's important that you visit the pediatrician and you're honest with them as far as what they're asking you, because they're also supporting you as a father and as a mother for the development of your children.
Yeah.
Making
and
sure
that's
they're hitting
why
those
it's really
milestones.
important to have that pediatrician, because I think sometimes now with the urgent care and the express care, that maybe we feel more inclined to just, okay, I'm just going to take them in because they have a cold. No, we really need somebody who sees that our child and understands the background and has, the history. So that's really a really great point. So you've taken your child to the pediatrician. You think there's some atypical behavior, or the milestones that you've just shared aren't necessarily being reached. What do you do? I mean, I'm sure you're feeling a little panicky. What do you do?
I think it's important to know that prior to making any phone call or involving anyone beyond that is remembering the window. That typically doctors will give you a window of if in this time frame your child has not yet met these milestones. Okay. And that's important to note for me as a parent. I remember we were at the end of the window for a lot of the milestones, but he was still within the normal range. And I think especially when it's hard not to compare when you have multiple children, when you have, I'm the youngest in my family, and therefore my son is the youngest in the grandkids. And it was hard to not do that comparison of, well, my little niece or my little nephew got this a little bit earlier. They might have been early in that window. It's also important to note when your child was born in the year, that if you're later in the year, you might be later in the development scheme, meaning a child born in January of the same year might be very different than a child born in November of that same year, or even over the summer. That it's just important to remember that.
I think that also, besides for the doctors, that parents, and that's what I've guided through my years with CCAC, is that as a parent, you need to use your gut. And if your gut is saying something is wrong, then make the calls, because it's better to be safe to understand, because there's things that for my son was delayed. He was adopted, so when we got him, he was delayed. And we did get in from infants and toddlers with just a speech language diagnosis. So then from that, how do you go forward? You're still trying to find specialists. And there are a lot of resources, infants and toddlers, Child Find. You go online and it can be overwhelming. But as a parent, even saying to the pediatrician, no, something's not right, what are you give me some names, then I'll take that. Because if you don't need a referral, you can do that. And he acted one way in school and one way at home. So school didn't identify it, and that is a common thing with children that are on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. So again, anything is like your gut, even if you're saying like that window, or I'm going to give them time, and they do have time, and it's never too late. That's one thing, never too late to get help, to ask for advice or second opinions.
That's
So that
true.
is always.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because when I found out that we were at the end of the window was after I called infants and toddlers and got hooked up with a speech pathologist in a class for parents that was held in the evening, very convenient. And I was amongst good company because we were all a little concerned with her. I had talked to our pediatrician and had called infants and toddlers, and they had this fall class, a series of classes that gave us tools to say, okay, if this is where you are, these are the strategies that you want to put in place tonight. So we all left there with our little notebooks, like ready to do those things with our kid. And it was that encouragement, and it was that, it just helped me so much.
So just to take a step back though, so before you got to that level of like, okay, this is the resource, this is what you need to do. What happens with infants and toddlers? How is there an assessment done?
Actually, could I also jump
Yeah,
in?
sure.
Because my experience is also a little bit different, because I had a birth diagnosis.
Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
for me, it was literally my son was born, and within minutes, they told us that he had Down syndrome. So my introduction to this world was immediate and at an incredibly
So
vulnerable
it's not
time
always
in my life.
okay.
So I knew right away
Yeah.
that there were things that we were going to have to do differently. And I remember the hospital social worker came after, we found it was like the first 24 hours he was born, and then within 24 hours we found out that he had 3 holes in his heart and only 1 valve instead of 2. He's going to need open heart surgery, and by the way, here's your baby, and go home and figure it out. Right. And the 2 resources she shared with me was one, our parent group, our Chesapeake Down syndrome parent group, and that's what I needed. I needed to hear from families. And when I would get these phone calls, that was back before we had social media where I could email or text someone, so I'd have to call and leave a message, and then desperately wait by the phone for someone to call me back. And then when somebody called me and they're upbeat and happy, and I thought, gosh, like, maybe one day that will be us too. Yeah. And the second resource they shared was infants and toddlers. And they actually, I believe, because my brain was not working 100% at the time, I believe the hospital made the referral, if I'm not mistaken. And that took a lot of burden off of me, because to be honest with you, it was months before I could say the words Down syndrome. And it was months before I could say the word Down syndrome without this crushing weight of really just the future. What was life going to look like for my son? And then when I went, and then infants and toddlers got in touch with me, and it was such a huge comfort, because I had just the most wonderful infants and toddlers teacher for his entire 4 years until we went to the pre-kindergarten program. And it was just such a comfort to have somebody there, because I wasn't alone. And so it was somebody who could kind of walk me through all the steps, walk me through development, give me all sorts of, advice and resources and support. Right. And because they came to the house, I was bound and determined that our life was not going to be defined by Down syndrome. I did not want our life defined by Down syndrome. We are early risers, so we get up, we'd have an 8 a.m. infants and toddlers appointment. 45 minutes later, we were packed up in the car to meet some friends at the zoo, because Down syndrome was not going to define my son, and it was not going to define our life. So she would come in, we would do the work that we needed to do, and she just was somebody that if I had questions or I had concerns, it was such a great comfort to me to know that I had somebody to walk me through the whole process. And I think that again, my experience was my life changed in an instant. And that kind of crushing weight of processing what was happening, I don't think that I would have been able to get where I am today without somebody stepping in and saying, here, this is someone who can help you. That's great.
And I think it's important to note, too, that infants and toddlers, if you get involved and linked with them and you're identified as your child needs some help with those skills, their job is to come and help you as the parent. So they come in to help and train parents for what they need to do with their kids. So yes, they're going to come and work with your son or daughter and help them, but they're really going to help you, because their goal is to train parents, because kids learn best within their environment, particularly little kids in their natural environment. So they want to teach you how to get them to communicate when they want the television or when they want a snack or whatever that is. So infants and toddlers' goal isn't just to work with the child, but it's really to work with the caregivers that will be working with your child the most. And it's really a training piece.
It's a coaching model.
One of the things that I heard across multiple different stories here, and you had mentioned go with your gut, and with the hospital, like you said, it's never too late. But one thing that every single one of you had mentioned is the early identification. And the earliest is the best. It's one of the biggest predictors for future success. It's one of the biggest predictors for future support. So the sooner that you can identify, get a consultative, come to grips, whatever you need to do, have the doctor send it in, you're giving your child a better opportunity to succeed in the future, because you're starting them earlier on.
So to that point, once they are, perhaps a child has not been identified, right? And they show up in pre-K or kindergarten, and they're starting to show some, again, atypical behavior in the classroom. What happens there? So they're in the school now. What happens?
So we would start, our schools would start off by, our teachers would identify, the need, and do what we call an SST referral, which would be student services team. And that would kind of start the process of a team of people getting together at the building level to brainstorm different supports that might be available for that child, to really try to understand what is happening and put in place some intervention. And through that process, the development would be monitored, and the child's response to some of those strategies would be watched. If through that process, someone was concerned that there may be an educational disability, then a referral to special education could be made.
So just to take
go
a
ahead.
step back, so for example, you're a kindergarten parent, right, or first grade parent, and you're starting to see, okay, my child's not reading at this level, and this is a continuous struggle, lots of tears, lots of, upsetment around it. So what do they do? What does a parent do?
So a parent could make that referral as well.
To who? To who do they refer to?
To anyone at the school, at the building level. I think I would recommend
Talking
to
teacher.
a building administrator
Okay.
or a classroom teacher. But one of the responses to the laws that kind of govern the special ed process is that as soon as we have a referral from anyone who has an interest in the child, we are required to respond to that. So as soon as someone expresses that concern, if a parent brings a concern to the school about the possibility of a disability or the need for testing, then an IEP team would come together and within 30 days and would meet about that student and kind of gather the concerns, look at the information, and then determine if the team suspects that there are developmental issues or delays, then they would recommend doing some assessments so that we can really gather the information that helps us to then target the instruction that we would deliver.
So what is IEP? What is that?
It's a fancy way of saying individualized education plan.
Okay, so every child that has a disability receives an IEP.
Anyone who's identified for special education. There's different levels. There are other types of programs that can support students who have identified disabilities. There's 504 plans and things like that. But if a student does qualify for special education, and that would mean they have a disability and they also have that need for specialized instruction. So, the team has come together through that assessment process and has identified areas where the instruction for that student needs to be different in order to kind of mitigate the impact of that disability. So,
And that, there's a lot of explaining that has to be done, so
There's
even
a
when
lot
you're
of
saying a team,
Yeah.
and that's where CCAC can also come
And what is
along.
CCAC?
Special Education Citizen Advisory Committee.
And that's CCAC. Okay.
And we work directly with the Department of Special Ed to help with educating parents. So it's a lot of information. We have meetings once a month on Thursdays, the first Thursday of the month, and we also have information online. We have an email address, which I can give a little later, and all that information. But even when you have that and you need it, you still need to always keep your resources and keep talking to the pediatrician about all the milestones. And I mean, we stepped over to IEP, but we never went through what happens at the infants and toddler
Oh, yeah.
level.
So let's back
So
up just-
you
yeah.
want to probably have that spoken about, and then go into what the team looks like, because the team is like a transition all through. And there's so many that are.
I'm going to just say too, we also have another organization. It's our Partners for Success Parent Resource Center. We have support through infants and toddlers, and then we also have support for our students who are 3 through 21, and that is an organization. It's a resource center with Harford County Public Schools, and it's designed to assist parents with accessing resources within the community, with understanding the special education process. And one of the missions of that resource center, of the individuals who work with us there, is to really connect families and help with that collaborative process for addressing throughout the special ed process. So the number for Partners for Success is 410-273-5579. Thank you, Dan. I knew it. We have two ladies working there. Carrie Sadowski is our parent coordinator who really focuses on infants and toddlers and that birth to 3. And then Caroline Bond is our parent coordinator who really focuses on 3 to 21. They have an office at Roy Williams Elementary School. There is the Partners for Success office there, and it is open for parents to come in. There's a computer to use. There's some different programs chance to make visuals for your student. There's a laminator, and it's just a really great place for parents to come if they're having questions or just need some connections to different resources. So we really encourage, anyone who has questions to start there, to reach out to Caroline or Carrie, and then they can point you in the right
So it
direction.
sounds like a lot of resources are available.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, as a parent, I would find at times perhaps some of those are quite intimidating. For example, an individualized education plan meeting, right? Like, how do you prepare for that as a parent? What can you do to feel like, I would find that to be overwhelming for the first time.
And I think it's different because if you're birth to 3, if a child's eligible to receive services, the family and the providers would develop an individual family service plan.
Okay.
And that happens actually oftentimes in the child's home with the family.
Nice.
And so it is different than when you get into an individual education program meeting. So once a child is eligible for infants and toddlers, and the family works together with the service provider to look at what are the family's priorities for that child, and together they develop an individual family service plan. And it is, we look at that natural environment like you talked about, and we look at the routines, because parents are their child's first teacher, and they're there all the time, and they know their child the best. And so that individual family service plan, it outlines the child's needs, but it also looks at strengths. It looks at the natural family routines throughout the course of the day, from waking up to going to bed at night, including bath time and meal time. And then it looks at, well, what are those family outcomes that we want to look at? And we usually look at 2 to 4 family outcomes, and the family often is the one that drives those outcomes, because we are trying to support the family and that child in the natural environment. And so we look at those areas, and we look at it in the context of the 3 child outcomes. And so the 3 child outcomes for birth to 5 are addressing social emotional skills and developing relationships, using and acquiring knowledge and skills, and using appropriate behaviors to get our needs met. So communication plays a big role in that. Social emotional, motor development, all of those pieces play a role in that.
And just to be clear about, we say social emotional, and parents may not always understand what that means. So we're talking about ability to self-control, like to be able to sit and listen and
social
those kinds
skills,
of things. Okay.
But those that are that are developmentally appropriate.
Okay.
Because 2-year-olds, if you're struggling to communicate, you may have a tantrum, and that can be very natural. That's
Very developmentally
yes,
appropriate.
that's developmentally appropriate. Now, when it happens multiple times a day for extended periods of time, that may be a red flag
Okay.
that we may want to look at, talking with the pediatrician,
Right.
even reaching out, because you can also just call infants and toddlers
And you'll-
and talk through.
Sure.
And once that referral is made, then the service providers will come into the home and talk through the family concerns. They would conduct those assessments, and then if the child's eligible, create that plan together. But then once you go into the school environment, that individual education program team does look different, because it's not in your home. It's an often much larger group. People that you may not be familiar with. You often have like a speech and language pathologist, a special educator. You would have physical therapists. You would have an IEP
We had all
chair.
the T's, as I like to say. With my son, we had physical therapy, occupational therapy, and we transitioned from an IFSP to an IEP. And I do recall having those service providers in my home. It was a level playing field. I felt super comfortable.
okay.
And I think more than to speak to that coaching part of what they do, the providers do, I remember teaching my son sign language. He had a trach, so he couldn't vocalize over his trach at birth. And so I was teaching him sign language, and my biggest fear was, well, he's not going to want to speak if he has this other means of getting my attention. And I remember the speech pathologist gently touching my leg and saying, well, he's going to get the information to you as quickly as he needs to. So if it comes out here, he's going to try that as quickly as he can. So he would do more, and he would say he wanted to play, and he would do all of those things. But she gave me that comfort to know it's you don't have to worry that he won't get the information for his needs and wants as quickly as he can. And he did. He moved right from sign language straight to talking with no issue. But that comfort was something I truly needed.
And I think that was I think that was probably our hardest transition, was going from literally sitting on the floor in our family room, he's in his PJs, I have my cup of coffee, and we're talking and working together, to then the big unknown of school. And, as I've always said, I'm kind of truly at the mercy of how my son is seen walking into that building. And you have all the control at home. You feel like you have all of this control. And then once you go to school,
It's the big bad wolf.
it is. And, it is.
Even when you're a teacher.
Yes.
Like, I'm a teacher and I deliver services to students every day. But when it was my child, it was I got to sit on that other side of the table.
Wow.
And it was a very different experience.
I feel very vulnerable.
You do. But I think for you and I feel like it prepared us that much more
As teachers.
to be empathetic to our parents and really understand that the level of, when we talk about the intimidation factor of all those folks sitting around the table, of having that pre-conversations with parents is key for me. Who's going to be there? How many people will be at the
so
table?
special educators will do that. They won't
Contact
help
the parent
prep.
prior to,
Good.
because it's necessary.
And I
It's
also think as a parent, that parents, need to feel comfortable advocating for what they need as parents, not just for what their child needs. So, some parents, let's say for a daily communication, whether it's a behavior chart or it's some sort of a daily communication tool, talk with the teacher and tell them what you want to see. Some parents want to know from the moment my kiddo gets off the bus to the moment my kiddo gets off the bus, what does his or her day look like? Other parents just want a thumbs up, thumbs down, or somewhere in the middle, and that's it. And we're going to come home, we're going to eat dinner, we're going to go to soccer practice.
Right.
And it's not a one size fits all. I'm glad you said that. I communicate with parents. I have one parent that I email weekly. I have one that I send a document home daily. It varies, and that communication is so key, and breaking down that barrier from a provider to a parent, that developing that relationship is what I do starting in the summer months.
I was just sitting back waiting for that opportunity to chime in. As a case manager, you asked before, how intimidating could that be as a parent to sit at a table with all these things? One of the most important things that you can do as a parent and as a special educator prior to that meeting is build that relationship. You have to build that relationship. You said it eased kind of your mind a little bit, and with your son, it was your son, right? That he's going to communicate how he needs to because you built that relationship prior to the meeting. I'm not saying that your special educator will be able to set everything at ease for you, but at least you'll know our first meeting is going to look a little bit like this. We're going to sit down and discuss some information. We will eventually determine, do we need to conduct an assessment? Here's some people that are going to be here. You already know the principal. You already know the IEP chair. I'm going to be there. You're going to be there. There's only going to be 2 other people that you may or may not know. Just kind of, it is difficult stepping into something you don't have any idea what you may be stepping into.
Walking into that room,
Right.
and like I said, I've been the chair, I've been the special educator, but as the parent walking in and seeing that whole table, because I joked that we had all the T's, we had occupational therapy, physical therapy, we had every service that could be provided, my son was provided.
But I also think it's important to remember as you walk into that room with a lot of people you don't know, asking questions is important. But our goal as a school system and as a team, an IEP team sitting in that room, is to help your child. And whether it's helping them getting special ed services or helping them get some kind of intervention just in the classroom informally, whatever that is, our goal always is to help the child. So we're there to problem solve. We're there to sit and discuss your child and try to problem solve and try to see what is it that we can do to help them. So it is nervous, it is scary a little bit, but just remember that everybody that's in that room is there because they're educators, they love kids, they want to help kids. And that's really our goal.
Right? You're experts. So I'm just thinking as you're talking, like, would I ever say to my pediatrician, my child has an infection, so they need this kind of medicine, right? Why would we ever think as parents that we can tell? Oh, you do? Okay. But I was just thinking.
I've been advocating for him for like 19 years, so I may do that. And that's like what you're saying, though, also is to say that he might have infection to bring it to light because the
Okay.
doctor might not see
So you
it.
have to advocate.
You know the symptoms he
Right,
exhibits,
so
how he
then,
leans
right,
his
and
head.
then respectfully though,
Right.
a lot of the things that we try and do, like Colleen had mentioned with using these resources is for the parents to get educated on what to ask.
Okay.
And how to
Navigate.
present themselves. There's
Yeah.
a lot of emotion in the parents when they come in, and like you were saying, how you felt. We really, really want to stress, even for CCAC, and I know that Colleen stresses it, and Missy, that we need to be. We can't go in there confrontational. We need to go in together.
It is.
And even if you feel too upset to go in there, then you need to say that. Not, and I have even said in a meeting, I'm feeling very upset. I don't yell at anyone because there can be, you need to explain to them, I don't understand what you're saying. Like even when you're talking about assessments, we can go to explain, what is an assessment? What are you talking about? Who
Yeah.
are these people? What are they all doing?
Right.
And there is a lot of information, and you can go on to the Maryland State Department of Education site to look up things. You can go in and come in knowledgeable, but also to sit back, like you said, we urge parents, and so is anyone, to talk. A lot of people will bring it's a secret, they have something. Like, they may have gotten outside testing. That's another
Right,
thing that some
right.
parents will do.
Oh, okay.
And then not inform the school because they don't want their child labeled. And again, that is a parent choice. You can choose what you decide. But you really need to feel that you can approach the school. And that's what is so important and what we really try and stress. And it is scary. It's all scary. But again, talking, people would rather know. My kid was really off this morning,
Yes.
and I
Email can change. the whole
email
day.
them,
Yeah.
and then when they're in school, they're fine, but they at least know. And parents to understand how they need to be responsible at home also, and that's a lot of times what we hear with, from infants and toddlers. They're trained at home, but then when you go into the elementary, there's a lot of you're supposed to do it at school, but it has to be together. And Colleen can talk about how what the team looks like, so you can know, and that's the purpose of us all talking here. Those people are like you are a special educator. You're a human being.
Yeah.
You have good days. You have bad days. You have a lot that goes on in your day.
Yeah.
So what does the team look like? How do we feel comfortable with them?
And I can speak to, I think the point that you made, Dawn, about collaboration is essential. That collaboration and trust. And Erin, said it. We are all, our goal for each and every student is to have them be successful, and successful in the general ed curriculum if we can, or in the general ed classroom if that is appropriate. But ultimately, we are looking for students to be successful, and having information from parents, having that collaborative approach to working through the IEP process is really essential to everyone, reaching that goal and having students be successful. IEP team members, I think Shannon kind of mentioned, we do have therapists. It really depends on the needs of the student and where the areas of concern are as far as who would be invited to that meeting. Every meeting there would be an IEP chair or building administrator, special educator, general education teacher, but then if there are other concerns that would fall under the other therapies or the other T's, we may invite a speech language pathologist, we may invite occupational therapists, we may invite physical therapists, audiologists,
Yep.
and it really just depends.
I think it makes it so key that the openness that I feel like has been talked about from all of us is so important, because when we're thinking about what related services may need to be invited to that meeting, we need to know kind of the concern that led to a parent referral, or there's a comprehensive look from the student support team of what informal assessments and what led to that referral, so that we can make sure that we assemble the team accurately based on the child's needs.
And a lot of times, if we're looking at assessments, you're also going to find our school psychologists and our educational evaluators as well. So those are the people on our team that look at assessments and completing those assessments. But again, it kind of all depends on the needs of the child.
And
for
I'll
who
also
that
kind of
is.
share a little bit about the communication piece and sharing your concerns. You know, when I talk with other families, when we're talking about that draft IEP that comes home, so after a student is identified, or, you know, every year an IEP will be developed, and then every year we come back to update.
Oh, okay.
And we look at their goals and their progress and where do we need to keep moving forward. So that draft comes home 5 business days before the meeting, so the parent has plenty of time to look through it. And there are 2 areas that I hear from a lot of families where they feel a little bit concerned about is, and this is where I feel like that communication piece and taking those questions and concerns to the special educator, is when we update, we call it the present levels. It's called the PLAF. But basically, it's like looking at, okay, let's take a look at where your reading comprehension is. How are you doing? What kind of grade level would we say that your child's reading at, and what are their strengths and what are their needs? Well, some families will say, oh my gosh, they didn't provide my child the accommodation. And let's say the accommodation is, my child is typically read to. And, you know, so that they have the text in front of them, they're hearing, and they can then go ahead, and that helps them to comprehend the text. Well, when we're determining kind of present levels where a kiddo is, we don't provide the accommodations because we want to get a true sense of where are they, what accommodations are needed, and then looking at the need for that specialized instruction. Whereas I feel like a lot of families will get this draft IEP, and they'll have this present level on there, and they'll go, well, why wasn't she read to, or why didn't anybody scribe for him? And a simple conversation with the special educator to explain, hey, this is what we have to do to kind of say, here is where we are, and here is where we need to go. And another piece is services. So we talked about physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. And that typically doesn't come home, that does not come home.
Right.
Does not come home with the draft, because it truly is a team decision. Well, a lot of parents are super concerned because they're thinking, well, are they not going to get speech anymore? Are they not going to get OT? Are they going to cut the speech from 4 times a month to 2 times a month? And there's a lot of anxiety over what are those services going to look like, because we know how important those related services are personally.
Yes.
And I think that's another time where just reach out to the service provider and see, and
Ask
realize
those
the parent, you are a part of the team, but come in and just say, hey, listen, I know that we're going to discuss this at the meeting, but this is kind of how I'm feeling. How are you feeling? So anything as a parent where you have a lot of anxiety and you have that feeling in your gut about something you see on this document or something doesn't feel right, reach out, especially ahead of the meeting.
Yeah,
Talk,
don't
ask
wait.
questions, and then you
think
walk
it
in, you get
can-
this huge table of people, and it can feel
It can
very
be
intimidating.
very emotional when you wait to have that exchange.
Right.
It is better to have it in real time
Okay.
and get those questions ironed out, and you can walk in and make that collective decision. We often talked about as special educators, or being in this realm, that we are the experts. I often tell my parents, you're the experts on your kid.
Yeah.
You've been with them the longest. And I start my meetings with parent input because I want them to understand that I understand the value in that.
That's great.
And they bring a huge part to the table.
And it is a very emotional experience.
It
I
is.
have the most incredible team, and I know without a doubt my son would not be where he is now without the countless people who, I always say this, believe that he's worth the extra work. But no matter how wonderful, it is a very hard thing to be a part of. And I find myself utterly exhausted after them. It's hard to hear the things we need to hear to move our kid forward. And it's a really emotional, I kind of have to kind of gear myself up for it. And I think going in, feeling comfortable with at least the conversation we're having, as opposed to feeling, disenfranchised, or feeling like I don't know what I'm going to walk into.
Right.
You should feel confident that you're walking into, as Erin said, this great group of people that are all working together for your kids. So don't wait for the meeting to get those questions answered. You want to walk in feeling good that we're going to celebrate your kid, and then we're going to say, what do we need to do together to keep moving forward?
And unfortunately, there's a lot of acronyms. And that is the biggest issue that many parents have. But as a parent, it pays to just ask, what, like you had said, what is the IEP?
Right.
And then, like, what
Translate,
is
please.
what is the IEP? Because even when you're talking about related services, what is, that?
What do they focus
Yes.
on?
When you were talking about,
What
you're
need?
talking about all the specialists.
Right.
Is the related
Right.
services. So even when you're talking about all these things, so maybe you could sum up what is the IEP even looks like as a document. Is it the Constitution of the United States?
Well, I wanted to take a moment because we'd hop from like the initial meeting to an actual IEP development. And just whenever I speak to parents, I kind of try to lay out the process for them. And to me, and please interject, but to me, it's a 3-step process. And I try to keep it as simple without giving too much, overloading the parents. But basically, the first meeting that we would have, I call it like our chat and chew. We're going to sit down and just discuss your child, all of the information that we have from you, from us, from the school, and then we're going to determine, do we need to test? Is there an educational disability that is impacting him educationally or her?
Are we suspecting that?
Oh, we're suspecting it, sorry, yeah. So we're going to
And what is the
decide.
educational need? What are you even meaning by that if you're looking at it? Like, is it that because my kid's failing? Or is it because he is not able to complete the work? Or is he performing, or they're performing below the grade level? And
So I
so,
think it can be any of those
Yeah.
things.
Exactly.
It's,
I
Yeah.
look at it from the
And-
reading,
yeah.
writing, math,
Right,
and
so-
then behavior.
they're saying like,
Functional piece.
that's the thing, for the parent to understand,
Yeah.
it's all of those things
Yeah.
looked at. So,
Yeah.
And then, assuming that the team has made a decision to test, there'll be a timeline, 60 days to complete the assessment. The second part is we'll all come back together, same members, and we will share those results of the assessments with you. So you could get the reports prior to, if you wanted that, or it could be shared with you at the meeting, whatever you're comfortable with. And a special educator, your case manager will take care of all that for you. But basically at that meeting, we'll share the results, and as a team, we'll determine, is there an educational disability? So that's part 2.
and the parent is part of the team.
Absolutely.
Parents think they're not. And also, even when we talk about acronyms, they're like, we're going to do a wiki, wacky in the paper. I don't know what.
I know that, Tess.
So, I mean, what do these assessments, and there have been parents that have said, well, my kid my special needs kid doesn't test well, so what are you even going to do, and what's that stress going to look like? So looking
I
at.
can talk about that
Right,
a little
right.
bit, Dawn. So, I mean, the assessments that Dan is speaking about are standardized assessments, because if we are moving forward with considering special education and we're looking to identify an educational disability, we really need to go with information that we know is going to be consistent across administrations, and these standardized assessments give us information of your child's performance in relation to typically developing peers or to other same-aged peers. So we're not looking at Harford County curriculum or the state of Maryland curriculum, because then, a student in another state with a different curriculum where multiplication is addressed in 4th grade and here it's addressed in 3rd grade, may be at a disadvantage because they haven't had that instruction. So the assessments that we use really allow us to get a comparison of a student's development and their performance compared to same-aged peers, and it's same-aged peers nationwide. There's sample sizes for every assessment. So that really gives us the information that we need to identify if there's an area of delay in any one developmental area, any one academic area. It gives us the ability to identify patterns of strength and weakness, and we identify patterns both in the cognitive profile, which is kind of the intellectual functioning, and also in kind of the academic profile, so their achievement.
Wow.
So all of that information
very
coming
thorough.
together, yeah.
Yeah.
And
It
like
is.
Dawn said, with the acronyms, those assessments are pretty involved and intense, but I will say that every evaluation, at the end of that evaluation, is an invitation to a parent to reach out to the evaluator prior to the meeting to ask any questions. So again, based on some of the things we've been talking about, that is something that is certainly welcome. When you get that assessment 5 days ahead, you preview it. If there are any questions, by all means, reach out and ask those questions so that you are prepared with all the information you need going into that meeting.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
This is a lot of information. Wow. Gosh, you guys do great work. And I just thank you so much for all that you do every
Could I
day.
share one other little plug?
Oh,
for-
sure,
for
absolutely.
Parent connections.
Okay.
And your part
Finish
three.
your part.
Yes.
Okay. There was a part 3.
Oh, there is a
All right, so part 3.
Yes.
Assuming that part 1 and part 2 have all taken place and the student does qualify as a student with educational disability, then 30 days from there, we'll create the Individualized Education Plan, the IEP. And basically, that's a document, what you guys call it earlier?
The Constitution.
The Constitution on how we are going to help your child succeed in the areas that were identified by the assessments. And at that time, there's a lot of components with that. That's a whole nother hour talk show that we can do for you guys later on. But just know that it's not just I put in a form request, so my child has an IEP, or we're going to test. There's different stages that you have to process through and go through as a team, and collaboratively, absolutely. So just know that there's different parts. We'll work through it with you guys. We'll build that relationship with you.
Yeah, and that's what Colleen said too.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yes.
Thank you. And one more point
No,
there.
and
Yeah.
I think the hardest part of my journey
Yeah.
as a mom, particularly in the beginning, was feeling alone. And having
That's so
this
true.
big, wide world open, but terrifying for my son. And I can't emphasize enough the power of connection and connecting with other families. And, I'm a naturally outgoing person, so that was a comfortable thing for me to do. But, if you're not a naturally outgoing person, it's very hard to get outside of your comfort zone. But once you do, then you realize you're not alone. And I can't emphasize that enough. There are so many resources in Harford County. I love Harford County. I've lived here my whole life. There are reasons I say I choose to live in Harford County and teach in Harford County. And I feel like Partners for Success is a great place to start when you're looking to connect with families. They send out emails with a lot of different information. We have the Harford County Office of Disabilities. It's actually the Commission on Disabilities is a part of Harford County government that has a lot of activities and community connections. We also have the Harford County Office of Therapeutic Recreation, which is recreation opportunities for kiddos with disabilities. And just connecting with other people, because once you realize you're not alone, everything is easier.
Yeah, the journey is that much easier.
Yeah.
And then I always say, the absolute best part of this journey, besides my son, is the people I get to share it with.
Oh, that's wonderful. And all of you, in different ways, are supporting so many students with special needs. Thank you so much for your work.
And this is on the table. It's supposed to be at every school. We've been working really hard at CCAC. And if you want to email, it's harfordcountyccac@gmail.com. And Partners for Success, we are connecting with them, and their information is on our lovely notepads that we have done. And so they're partners.success@hcps.org, as Colleen mentioned.
Yes.
And if you email to that, we'll connect you with everything too. So that we just want to say, reach out, ask the questions like you're all saying.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're just not alone, right? And we're really here to
Absolutely.
support, and thank you all in different ways. Like I said, you're all doing such great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today for Parent Academy Real Talk. Remember, HCPS parents are students' first and best teachers.